Bill Maher had never imagined he'd find himself at a private dinner at the White House with Donald Trump and Kid Rock. Yet, when he confronted Trump about a possible third term, the response stunned every guest at the table. Bill Maher had barely started his second glass of Pinot Noir when his phone lit up. It was a number he didn't recognize, with a Washington, D.C. area code. He almost let voicemail pick it up, but a gut feeling nudged him to answer. "Bill, it's Bob, Kid Rock," said a raspy, nasal voice, instantly recognizable. Bill sat up, intrigued. "What do you want, Bob?" "Dinner at the White House. Trump wants you there. Just a few of us. Dana White's coming too." Bill laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Bob was dead serious. "Wait, you're saying Trump wants me at a private dinner?" "Yeah. I told him it'd shake things up, different viewpoints, all that." "Come on, man. You'd be surprised what happens when people sit down and break bread." Bill was floored. Everything about the invitation felt absurd, and yet a part of him, that same curious instinct that had made him a contrarian, whispered, "Go." He didn't answer right away. He asked for the date, told Bob he'd think about it, then hung up. Then he sat alone in the quiet of his Los Angeles home, wrestling with a decision most people would never face. Bill wasn't scared. He'd sparred with tougher opponents than Trump, but the optics, the public backlash, he could already picture the headlines. But what if something good came of it? What if, for once, people from opposite sides of America's great divide talked, not on TV, not behind podiums, but over a table? 3 days later, he stepped off a flight at Baltimore-Washington International Airport and slid into a black SUV headed for Pennsylvania Avenue. The driver stayed silent. Bill didn't need him to talk. When they pulled up to the White House gates, a gust of cold reality blew through the open window. He rolled it up. A staffer greeted him and led him through security. He followed down a quiet hallway, past portraits and polished floors, into a dining room bathed in soft, overhead light. And there they were. Donald Trump, seated at the head of the table. Kid Rock, already deep into his drink. Dana White, arms crossed, nodding to something Trump had just said. The room froze when Maher walked in. Trump stood, flashing that half-smile he'd mastered so well. "Look who finally showed up. I thought you were too scared to come, Bill." "I'm not afraid of awkward dinners. Just bad food," Bill shot back, shaking Trump's hand. Kid Rock chuckled, and Dana gave a nod of approval. They all sat down. For the first 10 minutes, the talk was small. Trump brought up real-time ratings. Kid Rock cracked a joke about leftists and gluten. Dana checked his phone, like he didn't care if he got caught. But then the conversation started to shift. The tone dropped. Politics crept in naturally, without force, without hostility, just real. And as the first course hit the table, the first shot was fired. Trump leaned forward. "So, Bill, tell me, do you honestly think the country's better off today than it was 4 years ago?" Before Bill could answer, a waiter set a plate of seared scallops in front of him. The moment hung. He picked up his fork, smiled without warmth. "Depends who you ask." Kid Rock raised his glass. "To us!" The night rolled on, but a palpable tension lingered, latent, ready to ignite at the slightest spark. The scallops, surprisingly delicious, almost went unnoticed. Everyone's focus hijacked by the conversation taking an unexpected turn. Bill studied his tablemates. Trump, holding his knife like a pointer, gesturing as he spoke. Kid Rock, slouched, boots half hidden under the table, sipping amber liquid from a low glass. Dana White, barely touching his food, watching the exchange like a front-row spectator at a fight he wasn't sure he wanted to see break out. "Everyone here agrees the border's a mess, right?" Trump threw out, cutting into his filet mignon. Bill looked up, chewing slowly. He didn't answer right away, not for lack of arguments, but because he knew Trump's play. Quick reactions, interruptions, a soundbite to pounce on. Bill, a comedian, knew timing. "I think it's more complicated than that," he said finally. "If you want a lasting fix, not just a campaign slogan, you've got to be honest about why people come here. It's not just walls and fences." Trump snorted. "You want open borders? Just say it." "I want rational policy," Bill fired back, "not a media circus." The line hit harder than he'd expected. A brief silence settled. Kid Rock leaned in. Hey, we're at a table here. Nobody's throwing chairs. He flashed a smirk at Dana, who cracked a grin. Don't tempt me, Dana said. Trump broke the tension, waving his fork. Look, I didn't bring you here to bicker. Actually, I like you, Bill. You're critical, but at least you're not some robot reading a prompter like most of those clowns. That's the nicest insult I've heard all week, Bill replied. A weird alchemy seemed to spark, not quite friendship, more like mutual recognition. They were all public figures, used to controversy, camera angles, and crowds that cheer or boo. But none of that mattered in this room. Not right then. Kid Rock turned to Bill. What blows my mind is how people act like we can't talk anymore. I mean, we don't have to agree on everything, that's not the point. But say one thing they don't like, bam, you're a Nazi or a snowflake. I've been canceled more times than you've toured in the last 5 years, Bill deadpanned. And yet, here we are. The table laughed. Even Trump grinned. Then Dana finally spoke up. We're in an era where everyone's looking to get offended, like they want to be mad. I run fights. Think people want peace outside the cage? Nah, they bring the cage with them. The point landed, and for a minute, no one said a word. They sat there, chewing, thinking. Even Trump seemed quieter, staring at his plate. Then he looked up. You know what I miss? He said. When people could argue politics and grab a drink together after. My dad fought with his neighbor every Sunday morning, but by afternoon they'd watch football together. Back then, people didn't confuse disagreement with betrayal. Exactly, Bill agreed. Trump tapped the table. It was surreal. This accidental moment of alignment. A left-leaning comedian, a conservative ex-president, a wild rocker, a fight promoter, all finding common ground, not on policy or ideas, but on something bigger. The notion that dialogue matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Kid Rock raised his glass again, toasting to conversations people swear we shouldn't have. They all clinked glasses, even Bill. But as the wine flowed and the mood softened, one question lingered in Bill's mind, and he wasn't leaving without asking it. The second course arrived, roasted duck with sweet potato mash, drizzled in something Bill couldn't place but enjoyed anyway. The formality was gone. They weren't stiff anymore. Just 4 guys at a dinner table with too much history, too many headlines between them, and enough respect not to start yelling. Trump wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. Let me ask you something, Bill. Be honest. What's your problem with me? Not the showbiz stuff. Real. Off the record. Bill leaned back slightly. He wasn't surprised by the question. He'd expected it eventually. You wreck the truth, he said. You say things you know aren't always real, but your people believe them. That's dangerous. Trump nodded, almost thoughtful. And the media doesn't do the same to me? Kid Rock jumped in before Bill could reply. Look, I'm not refereeing, but let's not pretend big media isn't picking sides these days. Everyone's selling something. Dana leaned forward. It's not just media, it's everything now. Schools, sports, companies. Everyone's scared to say the wrong thing. That's the real problem. Nobody's allowed to mess up anymore. Exactly, Trump said. You say the wrong thing once, you're done. They'll destroy you. That's what they call woke, right? It's not justice, it's punishment. Bill sat up straighter. No, woke, when done right, is about awareness, spotting patterns of injustice and inequality. But what you're describing is social media performance art. It's fear dressed up as virtue. Kid Rock grinned. You just called your own people fake. I called everyone fake, Bill shot back. It's the age we're in. Left, right, center, doesn't matter. We're all playing parts now. Half the time I don't even know who's real anymore. The room went quiet. Not tense, just quiet. Because even the cynics among them couldn't deny the truth in that. Trump pushed his plate forward and crossed his arms. So what do we do about it? Bill shrugged. Start by admitting we're all full of crap sometimes. Then maybe listen more than we tweet. Dana nodded. That's pretty rich coming from the guy with one of the snarkiest shows on TV. Bill smirked. Snark's a coping mechanism. Try 3 years of cable news without it. Kid Rock laughed low and slow. Fair. Trump narrowed his eyes at Bill. Do you ever think I'm right about anything? There it was. The real question. Not for laughs, not for an audience, just a man, ego in check for a rare second, asking someone he saw as an adversary if he saw any worth in what he'd done. Bill didn't rush to answer. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think you hit something with immigration. People want borders. They just don't want cruelty. You overplayed it, but you weren't wrong that a country needs structure." Trump didn't smile. He just gave a slow nod. "You're not who I thought you'd be," Bill added. "I still don't trust you, but I get why people do." Kid Rock glanced between them. "This is like watching a bald eagle high-five a vegan," he said. "Weird as hell, but kinda cool." They all laughed. Then Dana stood and stretched. "I gotta bounce." Fresh air would soon hit them on the balcony. Trump, standing too, said, "Let's take a walk. I want to show you something." They got up from the table. Staff started clearing plates as the group headed into the hallway. But what Trump wanted to reveal wasn't a historic painting or a new decor piece. It was something far more symbolic, and the conversation was about to get a lot more personal. They moved down the corridor, silent except for the faint clack of shoes on waxed floors. A dim light guided them through the east wing as a staffer trailed a few steps behind, wordless. Trump led, hands clasped behind his back, walking with purpose. Half showman, half general. He didn't say where they were going, he just walked, and the others followed. Finally, they stopped at a set of heavy white doors. 2 guards stood on either side. Trump turned slightly and nodded toward them. "The Lincoln bedroom," he said. "You've all seen pictures, but never in person, right?" No one answered, but they didn't need to. He opened the doors himself. The room was dark, lit by a tall lamp in the corner and a subtle wall sconce above the bed. At the center stood a massive mahogany desk, roped off with red velvet. Under glass on the wall hung the Gettysburg Address, handwritten. The air felt heavy. Bill stepped forward slowly. "So this is where Lincoln slept." Trump stood by the door, hands in his pockets. "I like bringing people here when I think they need to remember something." Bill turned. "And what's that?" Trump locked eyes with him. "That even the greatest presidents were hated in their time." No punchline, no smirk, just the statement, hanging in the air like smoke. Dana crossed his arms, glancing at the wall. Kid Rock hung back, oddly quiet. "True," Bill said. "Lincoln was called a tyrant, a clown. He tore the country apart to save it." Trump nodded. "Remind you of anything?" Bill didn't answer. He just looked at the desk, then the framed speech. "This is where it happened," Bill said. "Are you thinking of running for a 3rd term?" Bill asked, voice low but direct. The mood shifted hard. Dana blinked. Kid Rock stiffened slightly. Trump didn't flinch. He stepped forward, slow and steady, until he was right in front of Bill. "I think about a lot of things," he said, "but we'll see how strong the country is when we get to that bridge." "That's not a no," Bill pushed back. Trump leaned against the bedpost, his voice quieter now. "They said I couldn't win once. I did. Then they said I wouldn't win a 2nd time. I did that too. After that, who knows?" Kid Rock spoke up for the first time in minutes. "If the rules get changed, someone's gonna change them. That's how it works." Bill shook his head. "But democracy only works if people play by the rules, even when they lose." Trump met his gaze. "What if the game's rigged?" "No system's perfect," Bill countered. "But undermining it because you don't like the outcome, that's how democracies fall." Dana turned slightly. "It's a slippery slope. One guy decides the rules don't apply to him, and eventually, nobody plays fair." Trump gave a bitter half-smile. "Maybe we played fair too long. That's why we're losing." For a moment, no one knew what to say. Then Bill stepped up, breaking the silence. "You know the difference between you and Lincoln?" In the Oval Office, the tension was thick. Trump, eyebrows raised, urged Bill to go on. Lincoln, he'd said, wanted to hold the nation together. "And you want to win it," Bill stated. Trump didn't argue, but stared at the Gettysburg Address, sealed behind glass. The words, penned by Lincoln's hand, etched into history by a man who never knew Twitter, never made campaign hats, never tried to trademark truth. "That speech," Bill said, pointing at the wall, 271 words. No ego, no slogans, just the core. Maybe it's time to get back to that. Trump stayed silent. Kid Rock coughed softly. "I need a drink," he muttered. A few nervous laughs broke out, but the tension didn't fade. Trump turned back to the hallway. "Come on, let's finish the tour." But even as they left, the air had shifted. Something intangible had been planted, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. The group moved down the hall again, slower this time. The silence wasn't oppressive, but heavy, like each of them was privately digesting what had just happened in that room. Trump stayed quiet for a while. He led them through a side corridor, into a quieter part of the residence, past portraits of presidents most Americans forget during quizzes, a hallway the tour guides don't show. Finally, Trump broke the silence. "I don't hate you, Bill. You know that, right?" Bill looked at him, torn between laughing and taking it seriously. "You're hard to hate when you say stuff like that, but then you tweet, and it all falls apart." Kid Rock let out a short, dry laugh. Dana hung back a few steps, arms crossed, clearly still chewing on the third-term talk. Trump stopped at a window overlooking the south lawn. "Do you ever stand here at night and just look out?" He didn't wait for an answer. "At first it's hard to take in. You're overwhelmed by what this place is, what it does to people." Maher stepped up and looked out. "So why'd you invite me tonight? For real?" Trump hesitated. "Because I don't want to just talk to people who clap." Bill raised an eyebrow. "Could have fooled me the last 6 years." Trump gave a slight nod. "Yeah, well, everyone plays a part." They stood there, side by side. A night breeze rustled the hedges below. In the distance, a helicopter hummed faintly. "I don't think we'll ever agree on the big stuff," Bill said. "But I'll give you this. Tonight's different." Kid Rock joined them. "Told you. When you're in a room with someone, looking him in the eye, it's not the same as trashing him from behind a mic." Bill turned to him. "You think this changes anything?" Kid Rock shrugged. "Not necessarily. But it proves something. People can talk without killing each other. That's something." Dana stepped up too. "The audience wants blood. Online, on stage, every channel. But maybe people are getting sick of all the noise." Trump leaned against the window frame. "They are. I feel it. Even my base. They're still loyal, but they're tired. Everyone is. It's like the whole country's holding its breath, not sure when to let it out." Bill glanced at the group. "So what now? Post a selfie and call it unity?" Trump shook his head. "No pics, no statements, no fake smiles. Just this. 4 guys, a table, a pile of bad memories, and a weird moment of honesty." They all nodded in unison, staring out into the dark for a long beat. Bill pulled out his phone, not for a photo, but to check the time. It was later than he thought. He had a morning flight. The studio was waiting. Kid Rock stretched. "All right, I'm out. That duck put me in a coma." Trump gave a faint smile. "Thanks for coming, Bob." Kid Rock walked off, hands in his pockets. Dana followed, offering a quiet nod to the others before disappearing down the hall. Bill lingered. Trump didn't say anything else, just stared out, like he was watching something in the trees only he could see. Finally, Bill broke the silence. "I'll give you this. You know how to keep the mystery alive." Trump smirked. "That's half the job." They shook hands. Nothing dramatic, no cameras, no big announcement. Just 2 guys who'd said too much to say nothing at all. Bill turned and headed for the main hall, the sound of his shoes echoing softly behind him. But as he stepped outside and breathed the night air, he realized something. The weirdest part of the night wasn't what was said, but how human it all felt. The car was warm, quiet, no music, just the low hum of the engine and the occasional creak of leather as Bill shifted in his seat. He stared out the tinted window at Washington's streets, empty sidewalks, red lights blinking over still intersections. The city felt less like a capital and more like the backdrop to a long, strange dream. The driver didn't speak. Bill liked that. He wasn't ready to explain anything, not even to himself. He stared into space, trying to process it all. The table, the talk, the Lincoln bedroom, Trump's non-answer on a third term, and how it all felt more real than he'd expected. He opened his notes app, just to jot something down before the moment slipped away. The scariest thing tonight wasn't the answers, but how easy the conversation was. The laughs, the agreements, the silence. He stared at the line for a moment, then locked his phone. Back at the hotel, the lobby was empty except for a tired clerk pretending not to watch YouTube behind the desk. Bill gave a vague nod and went straight for the elevator. In his room, he kicked off his shoes, loosened his tie, and sank into the armchair by the window. He could still hear Trump's voice, like it hadn't fully left the air. What if the game's rigged? That line stuck because no matter where you stood, red hats or eye rolls at red hats, There's that nagging thought that maybe the whole system's frayed, not broken, just worn out. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Kid Rock had said something too. Something Bill hadn't fully clocked in the moment. You can't yell across the aisle that long without forgetting what your own voice sounds like. Yeah, he thought, picturing his own crowd. The ones who cheer when he skewers someone, who don't want nuance, who want wins, not talks. Then he thought of Trump's people, fiercely loyal, angry, tired of being talked down to. Different camps, same exhaustion. What was this dinner, really? A stunt? A gesture? Or maybe just a weird pause in the shouting, a foreman time out in this circus? Bill reached for the remote, then stopped. He didn't want it. He craved quiet. Off the news, off the takes, off the jokes. Just a break from the noise. He grabbed his phone again and typed one more thought. Sometimes the loudest truth comes when nobody's trying to win. He saved it, then set the phone face down. He wasn't naive. One dinner didn't fix anything. No policies shifted, no minds flipped, no audiences won over. But it wasn't nothing. 4 people talked. No cameras, no scripts, no safety net of applause. That had to mean something. Maybe not to the world, but to Bill, it meant a lot. He knew the story wasn't over, though, because the hardest part would be deciding whether to tell it. The next morning, Bill sat at his desk, a half-drunk coffee and a legal pad he hadn't touched in years in front of him. He wasn't sure what to write, not for lack of material, but because there was too much and none of it fit a headline. How do you tell the world you ate duck with Donald Trump and walked away with more questions than you came with? How do you admit that between the jabs and the barbs, you saw something oddly familiar in a guy you'd spent your career mocking? Bill knew the risks. He could already hear the blowback. Sellout, traitor, closet conservative, or worse, reasonable. But what bugged him most was the thought of being misread for telling the truth. He scribbled something, crossed it out, then started again. It's easier to yell at someone you've never met, harder to hate someone who just poured you a glass of wine. That was true. They didn't become buddies, no big hugs, no swapping numbers. But they'd talked, listened, disagreed, and somehow, nobody left the room mad. That alone felt revolutionary. He thought back to the Lincoln bedroom, the weight of those words under glass, the way Trump had looked at that document, not like a tourist, but like someone trying to carve his own place in history. That's what stuck with him. Because for all the chaos, controversy, and clutter he'd stirred up, Trump was, at his core, a guy chasing legacy, a guy who wanted to be remembered for more than headlines and haters. And maybe that's what made the night so real. Beneath the polish of politics, ego, and noise, there was something deeply human about 4 guys from clashing worlds sitting down to a meal and talking like people. Bill closed the notebook and leaned back in his chair. He wasn't going to make it a big monologue on the next show, or post pics, or clips, or chase viral. Some moments don't belong to the internet. They're meant to live in the heads of the people who were there. But if there was one takeaway, one thing he wished everyone could get, it was this. When you sit down with someone you think you hate, you usually find out you were both wrong. He looked out the window. The sky was clearing. The noise was already creeping back. Emails, texts, headlines, the same old grind. But for a second, he held onto the quiet of that room, the weight of the Gettysburg Address, the absence of applause, the strange peace of not needing to win. He picked up his pen. He ended with one line. You don't have to agree with someone to get them, but you do have to sit down and listen. Maybe that was the point of the dinner, not to change minds or remake the world, but to remind us that beneath the racket, we're still capable of one simple forgotten thing, talking. If that hits you, if you're tired of the yelling and hungry for quiet truth, then subscribe. Because the only way forward is together, even if it starts at a weird dinner table.